All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our quarterly Bloomin PGC Urban Farmers and Growers Workshop. My name is Kim Rush Lynch, and I'm the Urban Ag Conservation Planner with the Prince George's Soil Conservation District. And soil conservation districts are here to help both urban farmers, rural farmers, and our developers, our urban developers, conserve and protect their natural resources, mainly soil and water. So we have an urban ag conservation program where I will work with urban farmers and some of my other team members as well, just to help them with developing conservation plans with specific practices that will help promote their soil health, help with pest management, and also any sort of water conservation measures. So if you're interested in that, please let me know. Today, we are very excited to have with us three amazing women who are accomplished urban farmers, and they're going to be talking with you about indoor sowing today. And then we have one presenter that's going to talk a little bit about a different form of sowing, winter sowing, and she's actually been doing some other workshops, but she's going to give us a little bit of an introduction to that. So I'm joined today with Jamilah Cassagnol of Sweet Love Flower Farm. She is an urban flower farmer in Upper Marlboro, and I guess your other location is still in Upper Marlboro.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
which is exciting. And so she's going to tell you a little bit about her work. She works for USDA, so she has this amazing ag background as well. So we're really excited to have her, in the county and working with us in this program. We also are joined by Stephanie Young with I just messed it up. Stephanie said Blue Berwyn Farm or Berwyn Blue Farm.
It's Blue Berwyn Farm.
Blue Berwyn, that's what I thought. Blue Berwyn Farm in Berwyn Heights. She is a teacher, I believe a math teacher who just like got the gardening bug and it just went right into farming. She has some really fun neighbors that are interested in her work. And so she started sales, I believe this year. So she's going to tell you a little bit more about her journey and some of her indoor sowing techniques that she does with limited space and, on a budget. So I'm really excited to hear about that. And then finally, Linda Jones. She's a master gardener, urban farmer. She's a garden educator and consultant, and she's going to talk to you guys a little bit about winter sowing. And you've probably seen Linda in some of our past presentations. So, oh, look, we have another teacher here. Grow Right Gardening. All right. So what I'm going to do is just first ask you guys a little bit about yourselves. And in just a moment, I'm going to share a link. And there's two slides on this. So after you finish the first one, you can finish the next one. Let's see. I'm going to drop that right in the chat box for you, and then we can share. And one question is what you're growing or planning to grow. And then the next question is, in which city do you farm? So feel free to go ahead and click on that link and populate your results. And I'm going to share my screen and we'll see what comes up. All right, we've got flowers, veggies, herbs. Seedlings, yeah, that's another great thing. All us gardeners here, including myself, always looking for seedlings. So that's another good market to get into. Okay, and then the next slide is in which city do you farm? We have Clinton and Upper Marlboro. Berwyn Heights, let's see. Brandywine, all right. That's awesome, Grow Right. Okay. So with that, I think we're going to launch into our first presentation. Very excited again to have with us Miss Jamilah Cassagnol, who's going to tell you a little bit about her farm operation. But before we do that, let me get my screen straight here. Jamilah. It's going to take me a minute to flip back and forth. Good morning, Miss Terry. And I'll just mention again to everyone, just Terry, so you know, we are recording this webinar. So if you'd rather not have your face or name on, you know, feel free to go ahead and change that or to stop your video. And if anyone needs assistance with any of the cues, there's a bar at the very bottom of your screen where you can access your mute button, your video, the chat feature, and also there are reactions that you can use. Okay, good morning, Miss Terry. And good morning, Elaine. All right, so with that, let me get Jamilah going here. Okay. And it's going to take me 1 second, Jamilah, to get this thing going, and I've got to switch out the view. Okay, can you guys see that all right?
Just your little black.
Yes, yes. It's a little gray, but we can see it.
Okay, usually that goes away in a minute.
Yeah.
Let me know if it doesn't though. Is it still there?
It's gone now, thanks.
Okay, great. Go ahead, Jamilah.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kim, for organizing this. My name is Jamilah Cassagnol, and I am the farmer at Sweet Love Flower Farm, located in Prince George's County, Maryland. If at any time you can't hear me, just let me know, and I will make an effort to speak loudly. We can go to the next slide. So, again, my name is Jamilah, and in this picture, this is my new farm location at Claggett Landing. It's right off of 301 in Upper Marlboro. Just a little bit of background on myself. I'm originally from New Jersey. I moved to the DC area many moons ago. I do have an agricultural background. I have a undergraduate degree in agriculture, and I've worked at USDA for almost 20 years. And I'm currently an ag marketing specialist. So I've been doing agriculture for a while, but I am still considered a new farmer as far as production agriculture goes. So in this particular picture, I am building beds. I grow and raise beds, and I'm, as you can see, manually building these beds at my new farm location. So you can go to the next. So I just wanted to give you just a little bit of insight on my, how I started with urban farming. Again, with having studied agriculture in the Midwest, a lot of the ag that I'm more familiar with is large scale row crops, orchards, things like that. So I had to kind of put on a different hat when it came to urban farming, and I absolutely love it. So in this picture on the left, that is my house, and I started in my backyard. This is about, I would say, 1/8 of an acre. And in this picture, the really tall plants you see, you could probably tell that those are sunflowers. And I'm about 5'4", and those sunflowers are definitely taller than I am. And just to give you an idea of the layout at my, I guess you could say this is my first farm. But now, as you can see, I have a new location, but this was my first farm. And so I started, well, I'll be honest, when I first started growing flowers, I was always good with vegetables, but when I first started growing flowers, it was a complete fail. It was an epic fail. I just assumed I could do it. I thought it would be easy, and it wasn't easy. And I underestimated what it took to grow beautiful flowers. But after failing my first year, I got my act together, and things really took off. And so in this picture on the right, that's my daughter, Isabella. And we had some flowers that we entered into the Prince George's County Fair. And we also made bouquets for our friends, our families, our neighbors. And so we finally got into the swing of things as far as flower farming goes. So next. So the purpose of this presentation is indoor sowing. And I just want to talk to you about it, how I do it, some of my pitfalls and my successes, and hopefully you could take one or two things from it and apply it to your own gardens or commercial farms. So why even do indoor sowing? Well, since we're in zone 7, the most important thing is to get a head start on the growing season. Because if you wait until your last frost date to start planting, you really you won't be able to harvest until late summer, and you've lost a lot of time. So the best thing to do is in these cooler months when we're all, we all got the itch, we want to do something, we want to be growing, it's great to get a head start on the growing season by starting indoors. Another reason to do indoor sowing is that you'll create the perfect environment for your seedlings to survive. Because when you put a seed out in the field or in the garden, they're really kind of on their own, and you want to set them up for success. I'll let you know, for me, my struggle is with rabbits and voles that like to eat my sunflower seeds. And so I will put out my sunflowers, and sunflowers are great for direct seeding, but I'll put them out, and then in a day or so, they're all gone. And I honestly, I never get upset with the critters, because I left them out there for them. So it is great to start indoors, have a nice, healthy transplant that you can put out into the field or in your garden, and the chances of survival increase, I believe, exponentially. And just so you know, this is in my garage. In this picture, I'm in my garage. You can see it's not the perfect environment. I'm definitely sharing this space with my family, but I made it work. And I feel like a lot of us, we're probably going to be doing this in our garage. And I'll talk a little bit about that too later. Next slide. Okay, so where are we indoor sowing? Again, for most of us in Prince George's County, we're going to be doing this in our garage, in our basement, or if you're lucky, under some type of, protected cover. And that could be a greenhouse if you're fortunate to have one. This is a picture of my house. And when I started, everything was right there in my garage. And I had stackable shelves that I started all my seeds on. Next slide. Okay, so how do we do this? Well, for me, 90% of all of my seeds are started by soil blocks. There are some that I don't use soil blocks for. And actually, it's sunflowers, to be honest with you. I put those in cell trays just because they're so large. But I mostly do soil blocking. And I learned about soil blocking many years ago from a coworker who used to work for a farm that supplied Wegmans. And I think a lot of us love Wegmans. So when you hear that, it's just like, okay, tell me everything. And so he explained, he introduced me to this Elliot Coleman guy up in Maine who was doing all these really kind of crazy things on his farm. And he told me about how they were soil blocking. These people didn't want to use cell trays. They wanted to do soil blocking. And they had movable hoop houses, and they were just doing all these really fun things. And so I read his book. I thought that it was really, kind of fun and interesting, but I just put it on my bookshelf, and I just thought, well, that's good for them. I'm not going to do that. Then I learned about the lady on the right, Lisa Mason Ziegler, who I consider to be the godmother of flower farming in America. And I learned that she soil blocks. So that's all I needed to hear. And so that's when I started soil blocking. Okay, next. So what supplies are needed if you're going to soil block and do this in your garage or in your kitchen or in your basement? So you're going to need a tub. You're going to need a potato masher, a soil blocker, soil blocking mix. And I'll just put a little asterisk here that soil blocking mix is not garden soil. It's not seed starting mix. It's its own unique recipe. You'll need a cafeteria tray, or if you're doing larger blocks, you'll probably want to use some type of propagation tray. You'll need your lights, and you will definitely need a heat mat. Heat mat, I should say mat. Next slide. So the process, and we'll go into this a little bit more, but the process is first to determine your start date. I'll let you know right now, late February, early March is when I'll get rocking and rolling. You'll need to secure your supplies and your mix. And we're in 2021 right now, just in case anyone is watching this later on. Do this as soon as possible because there's a lot of supply chain issues right now. So it's not like in the past where you can order something and get it in 2 weeks. You might order today and you're lucky if you get it in a month. So that's for those of us, this is 2021, and that you want to be mindful of that. You want to create your blocks, sow your seeds, nurture your seedlings. You're going to harden them off and then finally transplant them outside. Next slide. So how do you determine your start date? Okay, so we're in zone 7. I'm pretty conservative. So I like to say that our last frost date is going to be the first week in May. I do believe last year in 2020, there was a frost in the first week of May. I think so. But that's kind of my rule of thumb. So what we're going to do is we're going to count backwards. So if we know that our last frost is going to be May 7th, then because I use protected cover, meaning I put all my transplants under a row cover, that means that I'm going to set my transplants out about April 14, give or take. And then that means that I'm going to start my seedlings no later than March 14th. And so my attitude, since I know I use protected cover, is I pretend I live in Georgia. That's kind of how I do it. If you're going to put your seedlings under Rime, Agrabah, or some type of plastic covering. But if you're not, then you don't have that much of a jump. But again, for me, I know that I will have started my seeds indoors by March 14th. Okay, so next slide. So securing your supplies and your mix. So there's, again, because soil blocking mix is very different than the other thing, the seed starting mix and the garden soil and things like that. It's a special, beautiful mix. So on the left, you have a recipe. I will be honest with you and say I don't create my own soil blocking mix. It's pretty involved, but I think that for larger operations, I know people definitely make their own mix. But you do thankfully have some other options. Johnny sells a mix. Vermont Compost Company sells a mix, and they have lots of different products. So you want to get the Fort V, which is what is used for soil blocking. And then Lisa Mason Ziegler, her company is called The Gardener's Workshop, who I mentioned earlier. She actually sells little packages, small garden-sized packages that are affordable and make sense for a smaller producer. And so I've used her mix. I've had great results. I've just placed an order for the Fort V, and I haven't tried Johnny's. But again, you want to order this stuff as soon as possible because there is a little bit of a backlog this year. Next slide. Okay, so I want to talk to you about the lights. This is not my setup. I'm actually moving, I'm in the process of moving, but for the purpose of this presentation, I took this stuff out of storage just to show you what it would look like once I'm in my new location 100%. So I typically have these plastic shovable units that you can get from, any, a Costco or anything like that. And I have my lights that are hanging from the top of each shelving unit. In the past, okay, well, I guess, so these lights are T5 lights. That's my preference. I do know farmers who are well-established, very successful farmers that use T12s. I personally have not had a lot of success with that. My go-to is the T5 light. Hopefully one day I can have LEDs. They're a little pricey, but that's my goal one day, to have LED lights. This particular light structure is meant to be hung. And so I'm hanging them from these little cords, and I believe these are from VivoSun. And the great thing about this is that they're easy to adjust. Back in the day, I used to use chains, which is what I had access to. I'll go to Home Depot and buy some chains. But that can be kind of cumbersome if you're, having to constantly raise and lower the chains. If you're kind of clumsy like me, and next thing you know, you dropped your light. So I'm trying these out this year, these adjustable cords from VivoSun, and we'll see how they work. I do want to note though, if you're going to do this, you also need to get zip ties to tie it to the top of your shelving unit, because the way the cord is designed, it won't really clamp properly. Okay, next slide. Okay, but if you're really like, if you just want to get started today and you don't really have time for all that, you can definitely just go to Home Depot and get a Fairy Moore's pop-up lamp. And I actually do use this if it's a seed that I'm struggling with and I just want to keep it on my kitchen counter. I will just use my little pop-up, and this thing never fails me. And if I want to lift, the only problem is not adjustable, so I just put textbooks underneath it to bring it closer to the light. Next slide. And that's what you see in this picture here. Now, granted, these are peppers and tomatoes, and I'm not a vegetable farmer, but I can't help myself. I think a lot of us, even if we are not commercially growing vegetables, we are still doing it. And that's exactly what I've done with that little pop-up lamp. And I just put this on my kitchen counter so I can watch them. Next slide. Okay, so back to soil blocking. So these are the main supplies that you need for actually creating your soil blocking mix. You see I have my potato masher that I just got from, you go to any store, any retail store, get your potato masher. You want a little cup so you can gradually add water to your mix, and you have your mini blocker. And so that's really all you need. Oh, and then the tub is very important. And you can use like a little litter tray, or you can buy these tubs online. You do want to get something that's pretty sturdy though. So it's worth going for quality. But those are the main supplies for making the mix. And depending on where you get your mix, you just follow the manufacturer's directions on creating the actual soil mix. And I'll be honest with you, I personally find it to be very therapeutic. I enjoy doing this. I enjoy sinking my hands into the mix and creating it. So it's not, don't think it's messy and it's a to-do. It's actually quite enjoyable. Next slide. Okay, so once you've made your soil blocks, they would go into these containers. So traditionally, following Lisa Mason Ziegler's practices, you would put your soil blocks on these little cafeteria trays. And you definitely want to have a heat mat to go under. Okay, well, first let me back up. I like to keep things nice and tidy. So, we're doing this in our homes. So I always put a little tray under my tray just to make sure that I'm not creating a mess. And then you want to be able also to capture the humidity. So you want some type of dome to put on top of your tray. Or if you don't like the idea of a dome, you can actually use a large Ziploc bag. Those work perfectly. Next slide. Okay, so you're creating your mix and you're popping them on your trays. Next slide. Okay, that's a picture of me actually sowing, putting the seeds in my little mini blocks there. So now you can actually see what the blocks look like when they're on the little cafeteria tray, nice and neat. Next slide. Okay, and then you're going to put them under your lights. I mentioned this before, but I use a T5 horticultural light. Some people use TA, some people use T12s, and they work just fine. Some of the more commercial farmers may be using LEDs. I think all of these things will work, but my go-to is the T5 light. Next slide. Okay. And then so when you're watering, you always want to bottom water. So in this picture, you see some of my soil blocks. I believe this is stock. And so you never want to put the water on top of the seedlings. You always want to just pour the water at the bottom of your little cafeteria tray, and the seedlings will soak it up from the bottom. And you also want to use a light fertilizer. I get my fertilizer from Johnny's, and I believe it's like a fish and seaweed based fertilizer. And you just want to, I don't use a lot, it's just a little light fertilizer. Next slide. Okay, and then so once your seedlings have gotten to kind of a mature size, you want to harden them off. And hardening off is the practice of gradually transplanting or acclimating your transplant to the outdoors. And basically for me, that just follows my workday. So in the morning, I'll set them outside on my deck or under some type of protected cover. I used to have a cold frame. I'll do that. And then when I come home from work, I remember to bring them in, and I do that for about 5 days, just so that they get used to that outdoor environment. Next slide. And then finally, you can transplant them outside. And because again, I'm impatient and I get very excited, I don't wait until my last frost date. I go ahead and put them out in April, but I make sure to put them under cover. So you'll see my transplants are there. This was my first garden, and they are under Agribon. I believe this was one of the, I want to say this was one of the heavier Agribons. But when you do this, you can kind of act like you're in Georgia. You've gone down a zone, and so they will be protected from any frost that comes in April in this area. Next slide. And here we have it. This is just a sampling of some of the flowers that I've recently grown using this technique. You'll see the sunflowers on the left. We have the pink cushion in the middle, and then we have our black-eyed Susans, also known as Rudbeckia, on the right. Thank you for taking this ride with me, and if you have any questions, please let me know.
That was awesome, Jamilah. Let me turn the screen sharing off for just a moment. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. It's awesome to see your process and what you do. And I really appreciate some of the supplies that you shared with us too, so people could get more specific. With that, we would love to take questions from folks. So you are welcome to come off of mute if you have a question, or you're welcome to type it in the chat box and I can read it for Jamilah.
I have a question about the mixture. You mentioned use the buckets of the mix that you were using. Is that, how many ounces would that be? Like 16, 32, or?
Let me think. Actually, hold on. One moment. Let me just.
Okay.
So if you buy, this is the actual tub.
Okay.
Don't ask me why I'm sitting right next to this. But that's the tub. If I were to use the entire, I'm not the best with measurements, but if I were to use the entire bag that I get from the gardener's workshop, it would fill up that tub.
Okay.
And that would be, I don't know how many seedlings I could create from it, but it's a considerable amount. Like, okay. I don't typically have to reorder
Okay.
But I'm just not the best when it comes to actual like ounces and
Okay.
cups and things like that.
I'll figure that one out when I pull it up. Thank you.
Thanks.
So we have a question from Grow Right, and then I'll get to a few that are in the chat box.
Thank you. I had two questions. Does it matter what size? I've seen different sizes of the soil blockers.
That's a really good question. And it depends if you're growing flowers or if you're growing vegetables. But the soil blocker size does matter. So if you are growing vegetables, you probably want to have two sizes of your soil blocker. You want to have the mini blocker to start, and then you'll want to have a larger blocker because you can put the mini block into a medium size block. It's kind of designed to do that. But for those of us who grow flowers, you can generally get away with just using the mini block. But if you're vegetables, you want to have two sizes.
Okay, and then my other question was, which I'm you can tell what the benefit of soil blocking is if you could share that, but I think my next question might take away from that. Do you pot up the soil blocks or do you transplant those soil blocks right into the garden or farm?
Okay, so for your first question, the benefits of soil blocking is, for me, it's just that the roots don't get root bound. Because when you use your cell trays, um, you kind of leave your seedlings in there probably longer than they need to be, and over time you'll see the roots are just circulating. Or even if you've bought plugs before, you'll see that those roots, you kind of think, oh, I don't even know if I want to transplant this because the roots are really pretty tight and they're circulating in that cell block. You don't have that problem with soil blocks because they do this air pruning. And in that picture with the stock, you saw that the roots came just to the edge, and then that was it. There was no circulation. They weren't root bound at all. So then when you transplant that soil block into the garden, they just take off. Now for your second question, I do not pot up soil blocks. I'm impatient. I'm impatient. So as soon as I see that my transplant is about that tall, I'm taking those babies outside, I'm putting them in the garden, and I'm putting a cover over them, and they can do their thing. But if I were a vegetable farmer and I was growing tomatoes and peppers and squash and things like that, I would think, and those of you who grow vegetables might want to jump in, but I would think that y'all would pot those up from a mini block to a medium-sized block. No, Teresa's saying no. Some people are saying no, but I think it's a preference.
It depends how big you want the plant to get. Like things like tomatoes, like they grow really fast. You could probably just put them out without potting them up. But something like a pepper that you want to baby a little bit more, you might pot that up.
Okay.
All right, thank you for those questions. Stephanie wanted to know about the Johnny's mix that you use.
Oh, so I haven't bought from Johnny yet. I buy all my seeds. 95% of my seeds all come from Johnny's. But for the mix, I just wanted to throw that out there for you guys if you wanted to buy from Johnny's. But I've bought my mix from the Gardener's Workshop. And I recently placed an order for the Vermont compost mix, the Fort V mix, and I ordered through Fedco. But I just learned last night that Purple Mountain Organics also they also sell the Vermont compost Fort V mix. And I spoke to the gentleman last night, and he has like half a pallet left. So I'm sure most of you may be familiar with Purple Mountain Organics, so you can place the order through him as well.
Yeah, they're located over in Tacoma Park, but they have an online store as well. You guys might know Dr. Amen, who does dryland rice farming. So that's great to know. Armand would like to know, how does humidity help with the plant growth in the seedling stage? Is it necessary?
You can get away with starting seedlings without the humidity, but that's just one of the elements that a seed needs to germinate. You want to keep the seed moist. You want it to be warm, and depending on the type of seed, it either needs light or doesn't need light. So that's just the environment where a seed, you want to create the ideal environment for a seed to germinate, and that humidity helps with that. I mean, if you can, I mean, obviously nature has a way of flourishing. So if you're not able to do that, that's fine. But if you're gonna grow seeds indoors, we wanna make it nice and cozy so that the seed can easily germinate and grow. So you do want to use a humidity tent if you have one.
All right. And Gina would like to know, what is the name of the vendor who sells smaller quantities of the grow medium?
Oh, that's so the woman's name is Lisa Mason Ziegler, but the name of her company is called the Gardener's Workshop. The Gardener's Workshop. And she has a very large presence on Instagram and YouTube, and you can go to her website. And even if you're not growing flowers, again, like she has things just for gardening in general. Lisa Mason Ziegler, the Gardener's Workshop. In her book, one of her more popular books is called Cool Flowers.
Thank you, Jamilah. If you're able to drop any of that in the chat box, that would be awesome. Do we have any other questions for Jamilah? Let me see. All right. Well, thank you so much. And if someone has a question at the end that they didn't get to ask, that's fine. We're going to have a little bit of time for discussion at the end. But what we're going to do now is, without further ado, we're going to move on to Stephanie Young with Blue Berwyn Farm.
Thank you so much, Kim. So like Kim said, my name is Stephanie Young. I run Blue Berwyn Farm. We just started selling vegetables to our local community this past summer during the pandemic. There's a lot of people looking for food, and luckily we had a lot of it. So we were able to help our community out by producing some local vegetables. I am actually originally from Vermont. I am not born and raised in Maryland. I am from the cold north. And so I've actually had to learn a lot about growing in Maryland, because Vermont and Maryland are very different places. One thing that I've taken from Vermont and brought here is I'm very focused on local. For me, like, I grew up in a place where it was all about buying, your maple syrup from your neighbor and like growing your own tomatoes. And so that's kind of something that I've brought into my farm here in Maryland. I am a math teacher full time. So the farming is actually on the side right now. And I teach high school math in Anne Arundel County. I am luckily able to bring my teacher planning brain to the farming aspect of what I'm doing. So that's been it's been pretty nice to be able to translate those skills into farming. What we do on our farm is we focus on no-till, and that just means that we're not actually disturbing the soil. We try and preserve the ecosystem that exists there. I believe that if we can step back and let the plants and the fungi and the bacteria do their thing, then that's the best thing possible. I grow veggies and some cut flowers. I've been gardening since I was 2, and I've been growing flowers for a couple years now. I have been seed starting in my own home for about 4 or 5 years. So I'm definitely going to talk about the things that have worked for me and the things that haven't. Like Jamilah said, like, you always learn from the things that didn't work. So I definitely have had some learning experiences throughout the years. Our farm this year, we're actually going to run a small CSA for veggies, and then also a bouquet CSA. So if you are interested, you can check us out. Our website, it's pretty easy. It's just blueberwynfarm.com. And I will actually be selling some seedlings this year. In early April, I'll be selling some cold season veggies. So if you're looking for kale, collards, lettuce, things like that. And then early May, I'll be selling things like tomatoes, peppers, things that definitely want to be planted after the last frost. I remember, Jamilah, you mentioned the last frost last year was in May, and unlike you, I'm a little bit more of I like to live on the wild side of growing. And so I was like, oh, the last frost date, like middle of April, I'm going to plant my tomatoes out. And I definitely was going out on all of those potentially frosty days. And I took every sheet and blanket in my home to cover all my tomato plants. Like if you are worried that it's going to frost, you can actually just take sheets and blankets and pillowcases and cover what you got. So I'm definitely one of those people that tends to live on the wild side of planting things out. So let me share my presentation with you guys. So we introduced me. You can see here I'm growing in these caterpillar tunnels. So like Jamilah, I try and do some season extension here. I've got some arugula. My arugula has taken off. If you're looking for arugula, I will give it to you for free. There's way too much. It's just such a great plant to have in the ground. And that is something you can start indoors or you can start outdoors. So it's really nice to have those vegetables that can be kind of flexible. And it's not really a vegetable that the squirrels are going to take, unlike sunflowers. So Jamilah already covered a lot of these topics, like why are we starting seeds indoors? You want to start them earlier so you can get a head start. You can control the environment, right? You want to baby them inside, give them the best start you can. For me as a vegetable farmer, I'm actually growing on only 1/5 of an acre. And that means I really need to use my bed space efficiently. So instead of planting a seed out in the ground and starting from day 0, I can actually grow my seedlings inside until they're like 3 to 6 weeks old. And so that means that whatever plant is in the ground, I can actually leave that in for an extra 3 to 6 weeks. So I'm not actually waiting for a vegetable to produce. Like I can almost just hit the ground running. And that makes really good, efficient use of my bed space. The other benefit for me, vegetable farming, is that it means that I don't have to thin. I don't have to, overplant and then go through and pull out plants to thin out the beds. I can just plant out what I have. It also means that if I have plants that don't germinate, I don't have to worry about like filling in that space, because if they don't germinate, they didn't germinate in my home. And I can just, where I would have transplanted that failed germinated plant, I can transplant a successfully germinated plant. So for me, it's really about the efficient usage of the space. And here you can see, these are the caterpillar tunnels covered in, I think we got snow like a week before Christmas. And so that's one of the reasons why I want to do this, is I don't want snow landing on all my plants. I want to be able to grow them inside in that nice, warm, cozy, controlled environment. So what you need for the way that I do it, I am experimenting a little bit with soil blocking, but the experience that I have is with cell trays. You can see here in this presentation, I've got some cell trays set up and ready to go. You need some sort of like surface or shelf to grow on, just to put your plants on. You need some sort of light, and I'll show you in a second what my system looks like. You need a growing medium. For the cell trays, it's usually just a potting, or not a potting mix, sorry, like a seed starting mix or a germination mix. The reason you want to use a germination or seed starting mix is that it's usually finer and thinner, and the seeds don't really have to worry about trying to like germinate through like heavy pieces of like twig or stick that are in that mix. You want some sort of container, and we'll talk in a second about like how diverse of a set of containers you can have. Like I'm doing in cell trays because I've been doing this for years, but I started in like Dixie cups, and I started in little like paper pots. So I'll talk about that in a second. I want a tray with no holes on the bottom so I can bottom water, like Jamilah was talking about. So something to hold in that water on the bottom. And then obviously you need seeds. So my setup, I actually have a like 6-foot tall shelf. It's got 4 shelves on it. It's a metal shelf from Home Depot. The shelves are actually adjustable, so I can have a larger shelf or a shorter shelf. Mine is 4 feet long, and I think it's like 1.5 feet wide. So it goes 1.5 feet back. And this is actually kind of nice because I can fit 2 of those cell trays either long ways or like 4 short ways. I just did it this way because I I always like to plan for the future. And so I'm always thinking like, well, maybe I'll expand. And turns out I'm farming now. And so I did expand. So it's really nice. I joke with my friends that the bottom shelf is actually a plant hospital. So instead of just seed starting, I can also use it as like the indoor plants that are not doing well, like the aloe plants that are sitting on the shelf and they're looking a little sad. I can stick them underneath the grow lights for like a good month to boost them up. And so having this space has been really helpful for a lot of different reasons. I use shop lights. These are like Jamilah was saying, like I actually use the T12. I started off with fluorescent lights, I believe, and those are a little bit like warmer, like they actually put off some heat. And so that's good and bad. Like lettuce doesn't like that because lettuce wants to be cold, but tomatoes love it. Tomatoes are like, oh great, I've got the heat and the light. So that's what I started with. They're definitely a little bit cheaper. I have just this year transitioned to LEDs because I do plan on growing a lot more lettuce and bok choy and things that like that cold, and it's also more energy efficient. I actually slowly transitioned into it. So I started with like just one shelf. I bought just like 4 of those lights, and I'm slowly transitioning all of the shelves. But that's definitely something that I think it cost me to transition to those lights. I think I spent like, $50 to $100. The shop lights, I think I got mine from Lowe's. It's literally just a tube light casing, and then it's got 2 slots for the 2 lights. And then you need some sort of small S hook to connect the actual chain. It comes with the chain, which is really nice, but you need an S hook to connect the chain to the shelf itself. And then a power strip. So I think 1 power strip will work for 2 shelves. So I need 2 power strips for the whole 4 shelf thing. The nice thing about these shelves is that I then use the top shelf for storage. So like all of my supplies and stuff, they live on top. The containers that I'm using now, I'm using cell trays. I really like these because they're really standardized. I use the 10-inch by 20-inch. You've got like this bottom tray here, and then you've got some sort of insert. So for my things like lettuces or bok choy, I can use this 200 cell tray. Like that's a very, very small spacing. For something like a tomato, I'm probably going to go with like a bigger cell size. And so all these cell trays are actually the same size. They all fit in the same type of like bottom watering tray, which is really nice. And you can honestly find these anywhere. I don't remember where I got these from. I just like look up, cell trays, and like 5 million different links come up. I got these 200 from Johnny. I do really like the ones that can't be separated. If I'm selling seedlings, then these ones on the left that can be separated into like little packs, like these are great. But I find because I reuse my things, I don't want to just buy plastic and throw it out. The ones that can be separated become kind of a pain to wash and handle after the first use. So I definitely like the trays that are just one piece and come inseparable. So that's what I use now. What did I start with? So you can see actually last year, I've got some of these solo cups that are filled with my really leggy tomatoes. And so that's like a great option. Like get a huge thing of solo cups. It'll cost you like $2.50, poke some holes in the bottom, you're ready to go. One thing that I did last year that I really liked for my squashes that don't like to be root bound, like Jamilah was talking about, the soil blocks are great for that. Squashes hate having their roots touched. Peas hate having their roots touched. Like you don't want to disturb those roots too much. And so those plants, you either want to plant them in a big pot, or over here on the right, I have these these newspaper pots, and I can drop a link in the chat later about like how do you make them, but it's literally just, those newspaper flyers you get every week, and you roll them around the bottom of a wine bottle, and then you have a pot. They're really nice because you can then just pop those into the ground. You don't have to worry about pulling anything out. You don't have to disturb the roots. You certainly don't want to move them around a lot. Like once you put them in a tray, you're not going to like pick them up and move them to different trays, every week. But they stay together enough while they're sitting still, and then when you go to put them in the ground. So those are really nice for squashes, I found. And I I usually don't start peas inside, but I am planning on doing it this year. And I'm either going to use these paper pots or probably the bigger soil blocks, because peas don't like it when you touch the roots. You can also use like yogurt containers. Like I've done that. Like I know there's a lot of like peat pots out there, things that they're supposed to be like compostable. The issue I have with those is that they really wick water away, and I can get pretty lazy about watering. And it means that my plants will actually dry out more than I would like them to. So if you're going to get something that that doesn't have kind of a hard plastic outer wall, just be aware that you're probably going to be watering a lot more frequently, and you want to make sure that you're looking at the moisture in those things. Some of the optional items that I have acquired over the years, I now have a hand sprayer, which has saved me so much. Instead of, if I have in the first week or so when I'm trying to keep the seedlings moist, sometimes I'll just mist the top. And instead of having to get one of those squirt bottles where you have to like pull the trigger every like 3 seconds, this is really nice because you can just push the button, hold it down, and I've really enjoyed that. But definitely not a necessity. Heat mat. I've actually never really relied on a heat mat. I know things like eggplant really love heat mats. I've also never grown a lot of eggplant. I know peppers, I've grown peppers, but I know that they like heat mats, things like tomatoes. Anything that doesn't want to be frosted on could probably use a heat mat, but it's definitely not a necessity if you're me and you're planting this way. I also really like these yellow sticky papers. I hang them up around, I get fungal gnats because I'm always growing things inside. And so the fungal gnats are attracted to the yellow. I don't know why. And they land on there, they stick, and then they don't bother your plants. So you can buy like packs of these at like any store. You can get them at like Walmart if you'd like. So those are kind of nice to hang around. They don't look great because now you've got like flies hanging up all over, but they're certainly helpful. And then also labels. Like you could get popsicle sticks, you could have masking tape, you can buy like nice labels. It's really up to you. You can really use anything, but I definitely recommend that you label things, especially if you aren't used to planting seedlings. Like you might not recognize what a kale plant looks like when it first comes up. If you've done it for years and years, you might very well recognize those things. But even when I'm planting like 3 different varieties of kale, I kind of want to know which one I'm looking at, because when it's this tall, I have no idea. So what I do is I take some moist starting mix. It does not have to be as wet as the soil blocking mix. Like it just has to be moist enough that the seedlings will have some water. I fill that into my containers. You want to make a hole in the soil as deep as is recommended for your seed. So like pea seeds need to be further down, whereas like a kale seed is really small. Like you can honestly just probably press it into the soil and then cover with some like vermiculite or some more soil. So you'll have to look up and see like what's recommended for your seed. And that's usually on the seed packet, or it's online everywhere. Plant your seed. You want to cover most vegetable and flower seeds with soil or vermiculite. There are some seeds that want light to germinate, and in those cases, you would not want to cover those. You just want to firmly press them into the soil so they're in contact with the soil, but they're not covered. And you would be able to find that information on the seed packet or online. And then I just like to spray the top lightly to make sure that the seeds are actually wet. After I've planted, I'm going to use a humidity dome or even just plastic wrap that I find in my kitchen. I don't want to use too much plastic wrap, but if it's what I've got, it's what I've got. Like I said, most plants don't need light to germinate, so you don't have to put them under light right away. And once they've started to germinate, I'm looking for like 25 to 50% of seed germination before I put them under the light. Once they have germinated, I'm going to switch to bottom watering to discourage fungal growth. So you want to make sure that that fungus isn't growing on top, because it will happen in wet, warm environments. So some other thoughts on my system, I actually keep my lights on for 16 hours. It might be different for the plants that you're growing. 16 hours is a good length of time. My lights are 4 to 8 inches above the plant. It really just depends on the plant. So some things are more prone to getting leggy. Some things grow really fast anyways. So if I have something that's going to grow really slowly, I want to make sure that those lights are really close. If it's naturally going to grow really fast anyways, then it's okay to put the light a little bit higher because the plant's going to, it's going to cover that distance pretty quickly anyways. And you kind of want to check like maybe once a week to see if you need to lift the lights or not. And then some plants such as tomatoes may need to be repotted into larger containers before being planted outside. It just depends on the plant. Hardening off. So you're acclimating the plants to outside. I do it over the course of about 7 days. I like to start with like 2 to 4 hours and then kind of increase by 4 hours each day. It's not like a rule that I follow all the time. Like it does depend on my work schedule. Sometimes I forget to put the plant out and I'm putting it out at like 4 p.m. and I'm like 3 hours is enough sunlight. But what I'll do is on the first day, I'll probably put it out somewhere in the shade. I actually don't cover it. I'm a pretty harsh plant parent. I'm like, if you can't survive, you can't survive. So I'll put them out uncovered. And as long as they're in the shade, they're fine. They'll be out there for 2 to 4 hours. I'll bring them in. Make sure that when they go out, they're watered, they're happy. You don't want to send an unhappy plant outside. Make sure that it's happy before it goes out there. If it's looking kind of sad while it's outside, bring it inside. Like it's okay if you put it out for 8 hours thinking like, okay, my plants are ready and they're not, just bring them inside, right? Just sort of like slow that process down. And so I'll do that for a few days, like in the shade for maybe 4 days, like increasing the number of hours. And then maybe I'll put it in the sun for a little bit. And then maybe I'll put it in the location it's going to be for the day. And then I'll let it stay out overnight. My only rule is that it has to be able to like withstand one night outside uncovered before I'll put it in an uncovered space. But again, like there's not a lot of rules other than like just make sure that your plant is slowly acclimating to being outside. And if there's a lot of wind in your area, like we've just had a lot of windy days, either cover your plant, protect it from the wind, or maybe choose to wait a couple days to start hardening off your plant. Because I've found that the thing that can be the most destructive can be the wind. So be careful about like those high gusts. Those little plants are not ready for that. Some of the issues I've run into is old seeds. I like to keep things. So like, what do you do with old seeds? What I'll do is instead of planting 1 or 2 seeds, I'll just plant like 4 in the same spot. And then if you have more than what you need germinated, you can just cut it off at the soil surface. But like you can definitely don't throw your old seeds out, like plant them because there's a chance that at least some of them are going to germinate. Mold or some sort of like fungus, I've definitely run into that. Some of the ways that I've dealt with it are, decrease my watering. You can put a fan on your plants. You can use hydrogen peroxide spray. I've used that before. So like a little bit of hydrogen peroxide mixed with some water, and I can put that ratio in the chat. That I've found is like really good, especially at like the early stages. One thing that I've heard some people will do if they tend to get mold or some sort of fungus is before the seeds have actually germinated, they spray everything down with hydrogen peroxide, like diluted hydrogen peroxide. So that will kind of like kill a lot of those spores ahead of time before the seed has even germinated. Fungal gnats, I already said, I use the sticky pads. You can also make sure that you're not watering from above. So bottom watering can help with the fungal gnats. I am notorious for forgetting to turn lights on and off. That's just my thing. I'd rather leave the lights on all night than leave them off all day. So I dealt with that for years. I've recently gotten a timer and it has saved my life. So, a timer can cost anywhere from like $10 to $20. If you are notoriously bad at that, like I am, get a timer. It's so wonderful. Also, inconsistent watering, make sure that you are consistently watering. So like on my to-do list every day, I wake up, I have breakfast. While I'm waiting for my coffee to be made, I check my plants. Are they moist enough? If not, then I'll water them. So like you want to make sure that this is part of your daily routine if you want to keep your plants happy and alive. And that's what I have for you today. What sort of questions do you have?
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Um, that was awesome. Love the sort of the little tips of the details, and it's interesting to see kind of like the things that you and Jamilah do similar and some of the variances, just showing people that there's different ways to do this. And I guess a lot of it does come down to personal preference and what you're growing. So we have a few questions in the chat box. The first question is from Philip. Do most seeds germinate better if you store them in a cold room, such as the fridge, before planting? Also, is it necessary to pre-wet or soak the seeds before you put it in a soil block or growing medium?
So I'm notoriously bad about seed storage. My answer is yes. It is better if you put seeds in a cold area, usually a cold, dry area. So a fridge will really work. You want to make sure to put them in like a plastic bag or something, or a plastic container first. I honestly leave my seeds out they get everywhere. And so I don't think it's a big deal. Just be aware that they are going to store better if you put them in a colder area. Now, if you're going to plant them all this year, it's not really a big deal. But if you're planning on saving seeds for like the next 5 years, then it is going to be a bigger deal. That germination is definitely going to go down the more that those seeds are exposed to warm and wet environments. And then the other question was, pre-wetting. So it depends on the seed. A lot of seeds don't need to be pre-wetted. I've done a lot of microgreens, and the microgreens, at least, that need pre-wetting are peas and sunflower seeds. So I think that those would be the types of seeds that would enjoy a pre-wetting. I don't know if Jamilah has anything to add to that.
Yeah, actually, that's an interesting question. I've never soaked or pre-wetted a seed prior to soil blocking. That's not something that I have done, but I will keep my eyes out for those instructions for seeds in the future. But it's not something I've done.
Thank you both. Trinia just mentioned that she also uses yogurt cups because it's free. So that's a good reuse, I should say, recycling of materials. Linda wanted to know again what the ratio of water to peroxide was in your mix. So maybe if you can drop that in the chat box, and I can also include that in the notes that go out to everyone after the session's over. And Jamilah wanted to know, how do you feel about the LED lights? Do you think it's worth the investment?
I mean, I've only been doing the LEDs for like 6 months now. I like them because they don't give off a lot of heat. I think the heat was honestly, I don't do it in a garage or a basement. I'm in my seed starting room right now. My shelf is over there. And the room really heated up with those lights. And so with this, it actually keeps it really cool. And I'm not checking to see how much electricity it's pulling, but I've heard that it's super electricity efficient. So for that alone, I'm going to say yes, it's worth it. But I think it really just depends on the environment. Like if you're doing it in a garage or a basement, the heat's probably not an issue. And the electricity savings is probably not more than the price of the lights.
Thank you. And Terry mentioned that almost any carry-out clear top container is a great dome substitute. Reuse, recycle, reduce as much as possible. And Linda Jones, she's going to be talking with you guys next, and she has some great ideas for reusing containers, and she's going to talk to you about winter sowing. Go ahead.
I was just going to add that I think I forgot to say, like, I actually take the dome off once my plants have started to germinate. And so you don't even need something that's going to withstand like weeks and weeks. Like it's just got to get the seeds to germination, at least in my system. I just need them to stay moist enough for the seeds to get going.
That makes sense. And Grow Right, she has me thinking about Thai food now. I hear you. Any other questions? Feel free to drop them in the chat, and you're welcome to come off mute because we're a smaller group today. All right. Well,
I
thank
did.
you so.
Oh,
Oh, go
sorry.
ahead. No, go
Um,
right ahead.
so I do typically start my seeds indoor, but now I'm hearing my husband is tired of seeing all of the seeds everywhere. So I was gonna move to the basement, but then now I'm hearing about garages. Does the temperature in the garage negatively affect germination or growth or anything? Or I mean, like, is there a best place for seed starting? I mean, I've been doing it again in my morning room for the last few years, but
Honestly, I used to do in the basement, but I didn't really take as good care of them because I didn't visit them as often. So wherever you're going to come into contact with the seeds, like as long as it's a place where you're going to be checking them, I think that's probably the most important thing. Temperature wise, like maybe you would worry about tomato seedlings in a garage, but it might also just depend on the thing you're growing.
I don't know if Jamilah or Linda had anything to add to that.
I think Stephanie is absolutely right about the best location is probably where you're going to remember to take care of them, because it's kind of like out of sight, out of mind. And that's why, like, I would do a lot in my garage, but if it was a seed that I was really invested in, that baby was right on my kitchen counter, which your husband may not let you do that. But that's what I did. I would either put them on the kitchen counter or I would have them by my television, just because I didn't want to risk making a mistake. So I like Stephanie's kind of rule of thumb.
And Linda just chimed in, out of sight equals out of mind. I understand that. All right. Any other questions? And I don't know, Linda, if you have anything to add before we launch into your presentation.
No, they've covered everything beautifully.
Yes, they have.
Yeah.
All right, Linda, if you want to come off video, I'm going to
Oh, okay.
spotlight you
I keep
now.
forgetting to do that. Okay.
And I will, when you're done giving your introduction, then I will go ahead and share your presentation.
Okay. So, good morning, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Linda Jones, and I am a certified master gardener here in Prince George's County. I own an urban farm, Elements of Nature, here in Clinton. I've been gardening pretty much all my life, as far as I can remember. And particularly the past 10 years, I've been volunteering with the Master Gardener Program. I just started my urban farm last year, which I continued on with some of the projects that I was working on with the Master Gardener Program and with other community outlets and food growers and gardeners throughout the area. So very glad to be here again today to share some information with you that would help you in your growing efforts. And as you can see from the agenda today, there are a number of different types of ways you can get your plants started. And germination is the key. Once you can get your plants germinated and started, that's the key. And with the winter sowing method, it's a different way. A lot of people haven't tried it, but it's been out there for eons. And recently it has taken off in a lot of areas where gardeners are able to actually start seeds outdoors in the winter and get a head start on their growing efforts. And with the two presentations that you just heard about indoor sowing, you're going to be triple ready to do whatever you need to do. So no excuses anymore. There's ways to do it. And another way to do it is through winter sowing now. And I'll give you all the tips on what you need to do to get started with that. So Kim, you want to plug me in and I can get started. You have my PowerPoint there. Okay. And I'll just pause briefly and then you can just move to the next slide as I go through. Okay, with winter sowing, what are we doing with winter sowing? And exactly what is it? We're following the way that Mother Nature does it outside for us. And with this growing technique, it is a super efficient way to get started without coddling and watering and hardening off, damping off, all those issues will be a thing of the past. Now, this is if you like gardening outside in the winter. You have to pay a little bit of attention to it, but not a lot. And even though we have other ways to sow, this is another way that you can consider as a way to get your plant started. So germination, getting that seed to actually grow is the key. So when you do that, that's the first part of growing, germination. So this is another germinating and growing method that you can add to your repertoire. So again, I'm a certified master gardener, educator, urban farmer, and owner of Elements of Nature. I've been here since 2006 with my business, and my urban farm actually started last year, and I do value-added products and a whole list of other garden-related programs, products, you name it. If it's nature-related, I can kind of give a swing at it and try to do things with it. I'm also on Facebook, so I post a lot of my upcoming events, which I'm having another winter sowing workshop in February, and I'm also doing some presentations on companion planting. So if you would like to join those, they're on Eventbrite for registration. So 2 coming up. So if you want to get more information before you head out in your garden and start planting, take a look at it. Companion planting is very important for helping your other plants to survive in your garden. So you take your flowers, your vegetables, your berries, and all those things in line with the birds, the bees, and the other things that are going to help you. That it's what you need to know before you go out into your garden this year, if you're a new grower, or even if you're trying to just build your skills and be a better gardener or grower. Next. The term winter sowing is actually it was officially added in the USDA's Agricultural Library Thesaurus in 2006, and it just didn't pop there overnight. There's an effort made by some gardeners, in particular Trudy Davidoff in upstate New York, several years ago. She actually was working on some projects for growing, and she was growing tired of being indoors trying to plant. And she tried this dome method using a milk jug. And she was very successful in that. And she tried many, many different plants in it. And what she found it was doing was it was mimicking what Mother Nature does on the outside. You get your rain, your wind, your snow, you get your heat that's trapped inside the container that's building condensation and evaporating out, and air coming through. And that plant inside the jug was actually doing what Mother Nature was doing to the seeds that were outside laying on the ground, which is like cold stratification method. So with the winter sowing method, you can plant a lot of seeds in contained domes that are called mini greenhouses. And I'll show you some of the ways you can do that, the materials you'll need, what seeds are actually good for winter sowing, and I also show you how to build your own little project so you can get started like today. And this propagation method is used throughout the winter and in temperate climates. This doesn't work in all areas, because like in the southern areas where I grew up, you don't need winter sowing because it's hot and it's already a greenhouse, so you don't need to plant anything in a milk jug or any other contained environment to get your seeds to grow. There outside is warm enough, there's enough humidity, and it's going to grow naturally at its own time. And the germination rates are very, very successful with this winter sowing method, just as it is in southern areas where you don't have a lot of competing issues as far as getting that seedling to actually germinate. Next. So what are some of the best seeds to winter sow? You have perennial flowers, perennial vegetables, half-hardy annuals, some herbs, and none of the basic herbs that are the little feathery seeds like the zinnias, and like sometimes the marigolds will overwinter, very rarely, but some of these seeds are too delicate for winter sowing. And for the delicate ones, in the winter sowing project, you can actually plant those on the side that's further to spring than to how it is now, say like late March, early April. There are some seeds that can be planted then, but that would be like late winter, early spring. Still called winter sowing, but it's a different temperature outside, so you can get things that would normally be planted in the ground in spring, like around March or late April, out on an early start using winter sowing. So I'll show you a list of the seeds. I'll send you a list of the seeds so you can see what you have in your garden box of seeds already, and you can start from there, or you can go out and purchase some that can also meet that criteria. So we're going to go to the next slide. When you're, again, so what are you looking for seeds that will withstand the winter sowing process? Your packet has a lot of good information on the back. It also has stuff about your zone. So you also need to not only look for the good candidates, see if those seeds are good candidates for your actual zone, because here you can't grow a tropical plant. No matter how hard you try in winter sowing, you just can't grow tropical plants. You need those that can withstand stratification, where they need to stratify for a few days or weeks in order to get the seed to break open, germinate, and start putting down roots, and then start setting up the shoots. So anything that says self-sowing, you can sow it outdoors in early autumn, outdoors early spring while the nights are cool, or they can withstand frost, or if it has the word weed in it, like a butterfly weed, joe pye, and jewel, all of those things are naturally scattered in the growing environments outside. And you can do the same thing with these seeds inside your jug and get the same results as you would if you grew them outside and just let them do what they do as Mother Nature dictates. Next slide. What are some of the benefits of winter sowing? We don't have to use electricity. We have no watering needs unless your jug is completely dry and it shows no signs of condensation inside. And some of the indoor seed problems that you might have, such as damping off, drying out, poorly germinating, or stronger, healthier plants, all of these are some of the things that you can get from that you can benefit from winter sowing. When Stephanie and Jamilah talked about the germination rate, their rates are a lot better because of the types of equipment that they're using, but sometimes people try to germinate without lights. They try to germinate without the seed starting trays. They just put seeds in cups and hope they'll do what they do, and that's when they start doing all these weird things. But they have very successful methods of indoor seed planting starting as well. So this is just another option that you can consider as you're moving towards to figure out what exactly you're going to grow this year. Next. Now, there are 4 phases in this particular project that I'm going to give you steps to do for yourself should you want to try that. So phase 1, where you're actually going to develop your container. The most popular container that we're going to use is the actual milk jug. It holds up the best. It kind of is like the queen of the winter sowing jugs, or process, so to speak. And then you're going to go to the second phase, which is once you've put your seeds in your container, sealed it up, labeled it, and done all of those things, you're going to sit it outside. Like tomorrow is going to be a good day for collecting the snow. It's going to snow on it. The ice is going to melt. It's going to drizzle down through the container, through the holes that are on the top, and then the water that gets inside the jug, that'll be your watering. And once it gets trapped in there, it's going to pretty much stay trapped and just start circulating up and down. It's going to absorb into the soil, then it's going to go back up to the top, condensate back down, and then in phase 3, your little seedlings will start to emerge. Once they emerge and they get tall enough where you get in your second set of leaves, that's when it's time to transplant. Now, remember that thinning in this project is very critical. You have to thin these plants. And if you don't want to thin them as much as 20 seeds should go in each particular pot or less, depending on what you're planting. You can use other cups inside with maybe 1 seed or 2 seed or 3 seed. The ones that I did last night for phase 3, I used some solo cups, and I had the smaller ones, and I put maybe like, I think about 6 cups fit inside the milk jug, and then you still put the top back on it, and then that's your double layer of insulation in there. So you can, the smaller seeds, you cannot avoid thinning those out because you can't see one little thin that's seedling that's almost invisible. You just sprinkle them and then just, tap them down lightly. You don't want to plant your seeds too deep because they will not germinate, but you want to have them just enough to cover the lights. Light's going to take care of everything you need for as the lighting needs, because these jugs are translucent. And then again, phase 4, that's where you're going to get to the point where you're going to actually plant your seeds outside. Now, you may ask how long this is going to take. It's going to take as long as Mother Nature needs to get the seed to grow, emerge, and ready to transplant. And that's about maybe 2 months. So if you start now, by April, all of these things will have happened. You have your seeds ready to come up, and they'll be ready to put in your garden. Next. Step 1, the project. What are you going to do? Find out what seeds you're going to use. And that list that I told you about, what to look for, figure out if these are actually good candidates for winter sowing. You're going to get your container prepared, and I'll show you the steps of that in the next couple of screens. You need to make sure you have this thing clean. You need to wash it in hot soapy water for one. Cut it in half. The milk jugs, as you saw the ones on the preceding slide, the handles are intact. You're going to drain the holes in the bottom of that container to make sure it's adequate drainage in the bottom of those containers. And you're going to make sure you drill some holes in the top, around the top half of that container, to make sure you get water drizzling in, and so it can condensate inside the container. You're going to wet your soil and fill the bottom half of that container with potting mix. You normally need like about 4 inches of soil in whatever container you're going to use. And then you're going to add your seeds. You're going to tamp them down to the proper depth. Seal it. Duct tape is a recommended closing supply. And if you use anything else, you may have to do double layers. It might not stick, but duct tape is tried and true. There are several types of duct tape, and I'm going to be doing some tests on various types of duct tape, because some of the ones don't stick well. Some, if you try to do this outside and it's cold, you'll find that your adhesive on your duct tape will seize up, and it won't actually stick to your container. So if you're going to do this, do it inside. And then after you're done, you're going to put your container outside like we showed you in the preceding slide, to let the magic begin. Next. Now, the mini greenhouse. What do you need to create this apparatus? You can use basically any type of plastic container that you see on this table. And there are more. There are about as many containers you can use as winter sowers as there are out there. I've used all of these. I have these big 5-gallon water jugs that I cut in half, and I put holes in the bottom, put holes in it around the top part of the jug, and I put maybe like 10 cups of plants in there. And those are the plants with the big seeds that will grow well, and I don't have to really worry about actually moving them anywhere. I can wait until they're ready to be planted, lift them right out, and plant them. The soda bottles are good candidates. The milk jug is a good candidate. I use 5-gallon buckets, and I use milk jugs, of course. All of those are good. You need to use a container that will give you enough headroom for your plants to grow outside, because they're going to be outside growing, and you won't be seeing them every day. You don't need to see them every day. You can go check on them, make sure they're not drying out, and maybe make sure nothing is bothering them outside. So just make sure you're using something that's going to give it headspace so it can grow to a healthy height, and you don't have to keep waiting and trying to move the plants around. Your seed packet, read the back of it, determine what zone you're in, and from there, like I explained earlier, you'll know exactly what seeds you can plant in your particular area. But a lot of the seeds on the list that I'm providing will grow in winter sowing pretty much in any region. That's a short list of it. There are hundreds more that you will have to try to see if they actually work. With gardening, just remember you have to experiment. If something doesn't work, try it again. If it doesn't work that time, maybe you need to change your procedure, but there are many ways to get things done, especially in growing, and just try them. It might not work because you have it in the wrong spot. It might not work because you're putting too much water on it or some other thing like that, but it may be an environmental issue. But with the greenhouse, it's self-contained and you don't really need to do anything to it once you seal it up and put it out there and just start letting it grow. Your other supplies that you need are, to your right, duct tape. Packing tape, the ones with the ridges in it, will stick almost too good for you, and it's hard to kind of rip the thing off just in case you need to check on it or water it or something like that. That's difficult to move. The one on the left, the clear tape, I tried that. It didn't work for me. It just kept sliding off the plastic. So it might work on a flatter surface other than the milk jug, but just try things to see what works best for you. You need your labels, you need your scissors or something to poke the holes in it. I use a drill, and I don't use razors and things like that because the blades, the scissors, you can have more control of it, and then you can actually get a better grip on it, especially with the milk jugs as far as split that goes from side to side to keep your handle on. Sharpies, paint markers, China markers, all of those are good for labeling your plant. So you need that to make sure you have a good label written on your on your labels inside and out. Make sure you take a picture of it, because if something washes off, you will not know what you planted in that container if you don't have a double label. And take a picture of it so you'll know what you actually have. I use also blinds, mini blind pieces from mini blinds, and you can also use those little plastic knives to write on it. So whatever works for you, this is intended to be a low cost, beneficial thing to do. So just don't overdo it. Don't overthink it. It's really, really simple. Next slide. So this is how a close-up of what the milk jug is going to look like after you cut it in half. So you see in the back, the handle is intact. And the only thing you have to do is put your soil in it about 4 inches. Then you can take the top off of this one as well. And you put, at the bottom, you put holes. Put your soil, holes. I generally let my soil soak in the water about maybe an hour, 30 minutes before. Then I just kind of take the soil out and then just let it drain through the bottom and just let all the water drain out that can. And then I know it's well watered and I don't have to do anything else. But if you don't do it that way, make sure you can see the water coming through the bottom. Just run it through a couple of times, maybe let it sit in the water and then let it drain. But by all means, make sure that soil is moist when you close that container up. Otherwise, you may be setting it up to be a little drier than you would normally need it to be, and then you would have to actually water later. Next slide. I also use juice containers. This particular container is not as good as the milk container, but with this one, you can easily cut the top off and slide the top back over, and you don't, because it doesn't have a handle on the bottom, on the back, and you can just kind of take it, squeeze it a little bit, and the top will slide right on top of this one, and this one works really well. Next slide. What are you going to grow in this? What type of soil are you going to use? The best growing medium is a potting mix, and preferably the one on the left is a brand that I've used successfully for years. It's Nature's Care. The one in the middle, Moisture Control, I would not recommend that one as your first project. You may want to try a side one with that, but I found more success with the Nature's Care product. With the leaf grow on the right, you can directly sow into leaf grow, but I use that if I want to use it in the later season for maybe like zinnias or other things that I can direct sow. And what I would do, I would cut this container open, leave it in the bag just the way it is, um, and sprinkle all your seeds on the top of it. Just keep it watered, and then as the seeds start to germinate and they get a little bit of about 4 inches, you can take those out and plant those other places as well. So there are three alternatives there for you. And but what you don't want to use is what I'm going to show you on the next couple of slides, which is topsoil, garden soil, or potting soil. Use the potting mix. If you use these, you might run into some problems with the inside drying out too quickly. Topsoil is just dirt. Garden soil is meant to be put on top of soil in your garden, and potting soil is mainly meant for putting transplants once you have them established. So don't use these in your winter sowing projects. You might not have the success that you would like to have. Trial and error is always things that we look for. So if you want to try it and say, okay, I tried, it didn't work. But this is just a precursor to not having a disaster on your hand, especially if you're going to use this for all of your plants. You may want to try some on the side, but there's no harm in trying. But for me, it didn't work. And when I showed you the container that had the little small seedlings, that's when the very small seeds that you really can't see, you have to broadcast those and just let them do what they do. And then once they come up, you can thin them out. But you definitely have to thin your plants because they'll start competing for root space within your container, and they won't grow to the length, the height that you want them to, because they're, survival of the fittest. They're trying to struggle inside that container as they do in nature. So third thing is protect your sowing site. If you're putting your jugs out in an area where you have squirrels and all kinds of other things crawling around, cover it up. You can put a screen that allows water and everything else to get through. I use like window screen. I have these big rolls. I will put them over the top of my containers so that nothing can actually get in, and just tuck it under the side. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, but you don't want stuff trying to get in there, because when the animals are out looking for stuff, they're not going to bother try to open up your stuff. If they can't see it, they're going for the low hanging fruit. So if you have it low and hanging out there for them or sitting out there for them, they're definitely going to try to get into it and take whatever they see, because they're hungry too, even though they have the woods to go to. But that's another story. So your containers are clearly marked when you put them out. You have a label inside and out. This is just what I did when I first started mine a couple of weeks ago. And I since have cut the tall labels out and put them inside the containers. And I wrote what the plant was on the outside, the date that I actually put it out. That way, if I forget anything about what I put in those containers, I have a picture of it and I have two labels, because I'm not exactly sure how much of this is going to remain after it snows and rains on it, but I have bought some new tape that I'm going to put on the top of these as I make them each year, so that I don't have to keep doing this every year, especially for the dates, so I can reuse these for plants for next year and don't have to worry about rewriting them. So I'm using different techniques to cut down on labor. And on the left here, for as closing the containers when you put them outside, this one is asking for things to get in it. It's on the ground and it's asking for a slug to just come on down. They'll slide right on up the side of this and get inside your container. So if you're putting your containers on the ground, number one, make sure that it's in an area that drains out properly. Because if you're going to have water sitting up under that, the water that's coming or leaking, slowly leaking out of your jug for as a water content, is going to get kind of setting up an atmosphere for algae. And the little strings are good, but you need to actually consider closing this and putting the duct tape on this to keep it closed, because I would think that something could get inside there and kind of mess up your seedling. So you don't want that. Next slide. Next slide. So these are some of the ways that you can set, go back one. these are some of the ways that you can set your jugs out. Wherever you have, if you have raised beds that you're not using right now, you can put your jugs and containers in there. Uh, you have an old wagon that you can dedicate to storing your containers, do that. But just remember, you're rusting out your wheels and things when you sit them in your wagon. And on the other side, they have double decker uh, planting beds in the back and just all over the place. So just keep them in one area. That way you can keep a good eye on them. And when you are ready to start your transplanting and all of that, you know exactly where everything is and you won't forget, oh, I put this one on the back of the shed. Oh, I put this one in the other bed over there. So keep them all visible, primarily in one particular area, away from foot traffic, away from anything that's going to mess with it, and making sure that you cover it to keep things out of it. Next slide. So in the spring, you're going to welcome your plants to the world. By the time you open these, it will be warm enough to where you can keep the tops open. Now, sometimes we get these little unexpected little frosts. So if you just watch the weather, make sure it's not going down to like below like 50 outside, and you should be okay. But if it's going to get a little bit colder, you may want to just keep an eye on some of these. And if you have to just close them back up for a minute, you can do that. Put a piece of plastic, just flip the lid over and just put something on top of it. But it's just so you can save what you've already done. But some of these are ready to be transplanted like immediately once they get to the level of the one on the far left, the bigger one is ready to go. And with winter sowing, you left it there until it did everything it needed to do, and you just go and lift the top off, and it's like magic. Oh, when did it all happen? Well, it followed Mother Nature's pattern of underground growth, top growth, germination, stratification. All of those things took place under that dome as if it was in a greenhouse. And you really only prepped the container, put the seeds in it, watered it, taped it, just made sure everything was done properly. And you went in and you just, sat down, watched a few movies, didn't stress over it, and came back out and like, there we go. So now that you have all of these things done, make sure you have somebody that can help you do this. Just take a little bit at a time. All plants don't need to go out at the same time. And make sure when you're transplanting, make sure you're putting your main crop with some companion plants to help them with the bugs and the other would-be predators that are out there trying to bite your leaves, eat your roots, and all of those things. So companion planting with this is also a good idea when you winter sow companion plants as well. Next slide. So there are about 4 or 5 links that are at the end of this presentation, 4 or 5 pages of resources. So check all of these out, and there are numerous winter sowing references out on the internet now. When I started actually doing this presentation about 8 years ago, I couldn't find anything on winter sowing. None of the universities had this stuff out until maybe a couple of years ago. They've actually started doing presentations on winter sowing in like places like Nebraska, Indiana, Wisconsin, Chicago, Purdue, Pennsylvania, Penn State. I've been sitting in on some this year. And I was like, where were you when I was trying to develop this? But all of this stuff, I pretty much did the research on my own, and I put it together. And I started, my first presentation was with the Master Gardener program. And then I did it with the Washington Gardener magazine seed swap. And then it grew out to other venues such as Rooting DC. I did a couple for, let's see, did I say Community Forklift? I probably did. And then other private groups that I've done this project for. But it's a good process if you're eager to get something done soon and you don't have to do a lot of work with it. So I have a cheat sheet that I'm going to give you after this presentation. I have Kim to send it to you, but it shows you the steps synopsized based upon what I talked about with you today. So just try this thing, and it will really, really help you to know that you can do this. And with COVID still upon us, more people are going to be trying to grow their own garden. So if you have family, friends that want to share in this process, let them help you when you get ready to start planting this stuff, because you're probably going to be feeding a lot of people or trying to help with different processes throughout the area. So winter sowing is a great way to get seeds started now, and you will not have main problems doing any type of transplanting after you have used this method. And go to the next slide for me. Next slide. So when you winter sow, Google this on, Google winter sow, and you will see so many things out there. It is just tremendous, and you'll be mind blown. And just be careful when you're looking at different things, so that you'll know exactly that what you're getting is good information. And I would stick to some of the university presentations. Winter Sowing, the organization, Winter's Own, Winter Sown, has a website out there on Facebook. You can always join that group, and that's a constant 24/7 dialogue of people posting questions about that. And just be careful when you're out there, because sometimes, even though we're gardeners and we're generally happy people, sometimes you have somebody may make a comment and it may go in the wrong direction or something. So just be careful about those things. So if you have a question that you want to ask, you can put it out there, and you'll get about 100 different responses. But just remember what you learned today and what you are going to be picking up from some of the university websites, should you decide to look at those. And you'll find out most of it is the same, but it's just a matter of technique. And I gave you a simple process to follow. And if you do follow that process, you should be okay. Next slide. Next slide. I think it might be stuck. Okay, so my favorite book on seed starting and saving was a book I picked up a few years ago called The Complete Idiot's Guide to Seed Starting, and that's out there on got it off of Amazon some years ago. So pick that book up if you can, or check it out. It has all the information about winter sowing and hundreds of other ways to start seeds and saving seeds, how you go about that. So that's another good resource. And I just told you about the Facebook page. Join it and enjoy the information you'll get from it. And I found, sometimes I'll respond to questions out there too. And if you know something that you can share it, and just keep it moving, because the more people that know about this, the better off we'll be. And for you flower growers out there, there's some good flower resources that I found over the years. One of these links was not working properly, and I can't tell which one it is until I click in on it. But if it doesn't work, just try to pull it back in again. So these are for flower seeds. Next. Next slide. I think this. Kim? Okay. So all of this information that we've gotten today is intended to help you to be a better winter sower. And with that, you can kind of know exactly what you're doing when you get started. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Hi, Miss Linda.
Hi.
Miss Trina.
Hi, Trina.
I was wondering, do you ever have to cover up the jugs?
No, unless I put a piece of screen over it to keep the little bugs or something out. Can you hold on 1 second for me? Hold on 1 second. I got to let this person know that I'm doing something. Hold on.
I apologize, everyone, for the slides getting stuck there. So we've got some great questions. I know Stephanie also posted in the chat box the peroxide mixture, so I will send that to you guys as well. And I'll just mention now that all of these presentations will be uploaded to a Google Drive folder that will be shared with you afterwards, along with the recording, so you can reference these things again. Let's see. So some of the questions, we'll just wait for Miss Linda to come back, but I don't know if while we're waiting on Miss Linda, if anyone here has information to share about their adventures in winter sowing.
I can say that it works.
Oh, whoops. Miss Terry, I think you're muted. If you want to unmute yourself.
Oh, there we go. It
Go
does
ahead.
work. Yeah, it works. And even this year, I'm using a dish detergent bottle because why not? I'm gonna throw it away anyway. So I try to reuse whatever I can. So just reuse, recycle, reduce, and try it outdoors, indoors, everywhere. Nothing beats a failure but a try.
Thank you, Tara. That was excellent. Sorry about that. I had an unexpected person to show up and I didn't want to think I wasn't home. So I had to open the door. Okay, so back to the questions.
All right. So John Dell wanted to know, do you put holes under the jugs?
Yes, you do. You put about 4 under the bottom and make sure it's going to drain well. When you put your soil in it, I test out everything. Make sure, even if you use a drill, sometimes the hole might seem like it might get clogged. Some people put a piece of tissue, not tissue, paper in there, but I don't like putting paper and filters in there because it might clog the hole up even more because it's so tight, on that thing. So I just don't. I just put the soil in it, make sure it's draining out properly. And wherever I sit it, I make sure that it's not being, the water's not being held under the jug. So it's best to just put it up on some like little stand or even rocks. If you put it outside, put it on some rocks or something that can easily drain away from the pot. So that'll work.
A couple of comments from Jamilah. She said, thanks for the heads up on the types of tape that don't work. That was key for me too, hearing that.
Yeah.
And she also said she loves the idea of using blinds for labels, something I hadn't thought about either, especially
Oh
if you have
yeah,
some
I mean
old
it's
blinds.
plastic and it's reusable. And I got I cut the thing up and I think I got probably about 500 little pieces of that. So I never had to worry about labels again.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Grow Right, she said she's been putting off winter sowing for weeks and she's going to get her tape today, but she did have a question about some of the things that you've already sown.
I've sown, oh wow, what haven't I sown? All types of greens, all types of lettuces. Right now I have a lot of bee balm out. I did artichokes, moonflowers, hollyhocks, milkweed, balloon flowers. And this other thing is the ones that people don't like are the ones that spread, the little birds take them out. But I can't remember that plant. But hollyhocks, all kinds of flowers, the celosia, I'm going to do zinnias, I'm going to do marigolds, and it's just so many. I have about 100 of them that I've done. Right now, I think I have about 80 containers outside, and no, and I'm gonna do more. Sunflowers, you can do those on the latter part of the spectrum, like closer to like the end of March. And so can you do zinnias and like the marigolds, all of those on the later end of the cycle because they're more like hot weather in a sense that they're kind of thin and finicky. So I would start those types of seeds on the latter end of the winter sowing cycle, which is like late March.
Stephanie commented, if you're a fan of YouTube videos, Fresh Cut Kentucky, I guess, KY, Cut Flower and Vegetable Garden is a great channel.
Okay, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we can see if we can find that link and send that to
yeah.
everybody as well. And I think that's it for the chat box questions. Does anyone else have a question for Miss Linda or for, either the other presenters, Stephanie or Jamilah, about their presentations today on sowing? And seeing none at the moment, we are going to end the formal part of our presentation today. We do have some wrap up in a moment, but I'm going to stop the recording. Before I do that, though, I want to thank Linda, Jamilah, and Stephanie for wonderful presentations.
Thank you.
There's going to be a resource folder again where we'll have this in the link. And so you guys can listen to it again or share with others. So let me
Okay.
go ahead and stop the recording.